When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. We're joined by House of the Stag once again, one of the greatest
Hello,
YouTubers
hello.
on the planet. You should subscribe to his channel. The link will be in the description.
Oh, thank you, buddy.
we
Thank you, buddy.
got to get that out there early. But we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite. He's a fan favorite, Bran. Okay, you love him, you need him. Okay, and we're gonna have a lot of topics today. We're gonna be talking about kind of his impact on George's writing. We're gonna be talking about what potentially we think is maybe gonna happen with his character, and a lot of that. And House of the Stag is gonna be my crutch because you guys on this channel know I'm not a Bran guy. You guys even look for Bran videos on my channel. There just aren't any. So we're gonna try and cover that topic today. So before we get into it, House of the Stag, I just want to know, what are your opinions on Bran?
First of all, it's very, very, very hard to write a compelling POV chapter
Yep,
of a child.
agreed.
And then you also have the problem that he can't walk, so it's even more difficult. And you gotta explain all the magical things that happen through the eyes of a child as well. So there is a lot of challenge when it comes to writing a compelling Bran chapter. I think it's I don't mind. I like Bran chapters for the most part. Admittedly, there is a lot of walking, a lot of yeah, not really, but
There's a lot of
roaming
other
around.
people walking.
Yeah, a lot of other people walking. But the potential is so insane. It's there,
Agreed.
and I feel like the payoff will be crazy in
Agreed.
these final two books.
That's my thing with Bran, is I think this is going to depend how I will view Bran's character, is how he's ended. Because I feel like Bran has been on this journey of, he's going to have this major payoff in the last two books where he becomes much more impactful to the story, much more useful. And I guess that kind of leads me into like my first kind of question, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, but especially going into these later books, why do you think it maybe is so much more difficult for George to write Bran than, say, another POV like a Cersei, for instance?
You don't have a lot of Bran chapters because you don't want to reveal too much. And as we progress with the story, as Bran learns to use his powers now, it's really difficult to reveal stuff without revealing it all. And we're really getting there. I feel like there are probably 10 Bran chapters and we're done with the story. So I imagine we will get 5 in the Winds of Winter. We got 3 the last time around when we saw Bran, and it's difficult. It's just really insanely difficult. I feel like
Agreed.
this is the one thing that is holding, not the one thing. There are multiple reasons why Winds of Winter isn't out yet, but I feel like when it comes to the actual story, this is the biggest one.
Yep.
And Bran is the one who started it all. When George was imagining the story, when he wrote the science fiction novel, he suddenly came up with this thing about the direwolf pups being found, and then he wrote the first Bran chapter. And yeah, I do think he's going to be king. Not necessarily king
okay.
of Westeros. Not necessarily king of Westeros. That might be something that D&D just misinterpreted wrong. But it's so misplaced in the show, so out of nowhere, it's so random that I can't help but feel this is coming from George.
I agree. One thing I do want to say, I think the biggest thing is like, the reason we don't have, for instance, like Varys and Littlefinger chapters is kind of the exact thing. Is like, if Bran starts learning all of this information, like, say he knows what happens in Robert's Rebellion and stuff like that, those are things that George is going to want to, pay off and maybe leave for the audience. He doesn't want to just throw them all at you like, oh yeah, Bran's just having a vision and he just learns all of these secrets.
Yeah.
It's not as thematically engaging, I would say. So that, I think, is definitely, I think everything you said definitely is why Bran is hard to just write as a character. Not only those other things we talked about earlier with him being, not able to walk, a young child, but now you have all these other added elements that it just adds for a very difficult character to write. But with that being said, let's get into like predictions. So what do you think Bran is going to be doing in Winds specifically?
I think we'll probably get a chapter that is focused on him training with Bloodraven. I think at one point he is going to take over Bloodraven's place, and then it's really we really gotta see how it plays out in terms of if he's working against the others or if the Children of the Forest potentially just use him. And it's that thing. I do see him and Euron Greyjoy being connected at some point in the story, because I do believe that the theory that Euron is a failed Bloodraven student. A lot of things are similar. Um, now with Bran supposedly eating Jojen
Yeah.
paste, that seems to activate it all. And the Forsaken chapter and the Shade of the Evening, it's a lot of things are quite similar.
Yes. And I 100% agree with that. I think Bran, I feel like we've had a lot of the last like book more or less where it was like building up, awakening Bran's powers, and I think that's going to be more of the same in Winds of Winter, and getting him to fully be ready. But still, I think that is an interesting premise for Bran, as he is this character that could be used to help fight them. I think he is going to also be part of just giving us information and like verifying things. So like when we get to this idea that maybe Jon is a Targaryen, or if you believe he's a Dane, whatever. Outside of, Hal and Reed knowing this information, we can have maybe Bran verifying that, saying, yeah, that's, true or whatever. And he could be used as that kind of a character. He could be used as a character where he, can spy and help, our forces understand the enemy's movements, stuff like that. But I think there definitely is a lot with Bran. And you even mentioned the Euron part, which is something I want to talk about. That's like my next little thing. But
Mm.
because I've always been someone that I have never really been able to figure out where Euron is going as a character, because he's such a weird part of the story right now, where I've been someone that's preached, we can't have all of these villainous characters still about, like Littlefinger, like Varys. Like some of these characters have to start, dying off so that we can actually focus on this threat of the others. So I'm interested on what your thoughts are, like just specifically on where you think, Euron as a character could go and how that would relate to Bran.
It all really started when the Forsaken chapter came out. Obviously, there was talk of it before when we talked about leaping out of the window, and it was kind of similar to what was happening to Bran when he fell from the tower, and then he was dreaming, and
Yep.
but Euron continuously talks about himself as a god, and Aaron sees him as this kraken thing, and he's a demon and a thrall of the other, which of course could be the great other. So he could potentially be something like a servant of the great other, while Bran is the one who tries to stop the great other and the others. So I think that could be a the final plotline. Could be Bran versus Euron and the others.
Which is
So I
very
definitely do
interesting.
see him being endgame. I definitely do see Euron Greyjoy being endgame. No shooting a dragon out of the sky, random.
Are you
I
sure about
think.
that?
Oh, I'm pretty sure he. The Euron Greyjoy we saw in the television show has nothing to do with the
Yeah,
one
of
we will
course.
see in Winds.
So, which is very interesting because if any of you guys have watched a lot of my Euron stuff, and I specifically have not put out a lot of Euron stuff,
Hmm.
because I think Euron is a character that I'm very split on. Because on one side of it, I could see Euron being this character, like you suggest, being very endgame. And I think the more I hear about it, the more I like that idea. There's also
Hmm.
this other side of me that says, Euron is a character that maybe he is being used to push part of the plot forward, like a Horn of Winter situation where the wall comes down, and then Euron after that's a little bit more expendable type thing, because we have
Hmm.
maybe this idea that Sam does have the Horn of Winter and he would be at Old Town, so maybe we see Euron sacking Old Town. He gets to the Horn of Winter from Sam, and maybe he just blows it. He understands what it could be. He has, some experience with horns. And he brings down the wall, and maybe that's the end of Euron's character. Maybe we see, the Tyrells, some of these other forces then take him out. I've thought about that being a possibility. I do think in that realm, it might be a little underwhelming for a character like Euron, who's been this hyped up as being this badass character, especially by characters like Theon, all these characters that know him, Victarion, that he would have a bigger role, like you're suggesting. So that's something that's always played on my mind, on the ways that George could go about with Euron. And that could be another reason why Winds is taking so long. It's how do you exactly fit Euron into the world and that conflict with Bran?
The thing is, the Forsaken chapter is, in my opinion, that is one of the best chapters George has ever written. It's incredible. It came out of nowhere when I finished The Dance with Dragons, and then I was looking up all of the sample chapters. I was just blown away by the Forsaken chapter.
It's a very good chapter.
Valyrian steel armor out of nowhere, and all of these visions, and he's keeping the warlocks, warlord. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Euron's a crazy guy, but we'll see. So my next question, you actually talked a little bit about this. My next question, just as a thing, was: do you believe Bran becomes king? Now, you mentioned maybe not king of Westeros, but do you think maybe king of the North or something like that? Or what are your thoughts there?
Again, I feel like it's so random in the show that it's that there has to be some truth in it,
I agree.
I think the actor who plays Bran, Isaac Hempstead Wright, also talked about this, that this was something that George revealed to them. I'm not sure if it's gonna be in King's Landing. I actually doubt that it's gonna be King of Westeros that is chosen by the Great Council or anything like that. It could be something very different.
Yes.
And there's so many factors. Is he leaving that cave? He has to if he becomes king. And
yep, I do think
really
he does
hard.
leave the cave. But yeah, I agree. My thing with Bran becoming king is it's something that I could see George doing, but not anywhere in the same route that the show did it. Like how we've talked about, it felt like out of nowhere, and especially the building they did for it in the show, it didn't make any sense with how Bran was I don't want things, right? All that thing. If he does do it in the books, I think it's more going to be Bloodraven and the Children of the Forest. It's kind of like a takeover thing by them. And he's going to, I think he would do it like that, like a bittersweet ending where it's we maybe defeated the others, we did this, but now there's Bran on the throne. And there is this idea that this isn't really Bran anymore. Maybe this is just the Children of the Forest taking over. That would be an interesting idea. Now, do I want that to happen? Not necessarily, but I do think it's an interesting idea and would make way more sense than what they were kind of playing on in the show. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that idea of why Bran would become king?
Yeah, it's we'll see. I don't think it's gonna be in King's Landing. So maybe the King of Westeros or whatever sort of king he is going to be is ruling from somewhere else.
Yeah.
He's not gonna. I don't see him being in the South.
Agree.
Ever. Agreed. And there's it all comes down to so many factors. Is he a good guy? In the original drafts of George R.R. Martin, Jon and Bran were bitter rivals, and Jon is so far. Let's see how he comes back and how much he will have changed. But so far, Jon is undoubtedly a good guy.
Him and Bran have a very good relationship. So
so
very interesting.
Yeah, maybe he is. Maybe that is something that was still going to be explored. Jon versus Bran in the end. Well,
that could be very interesting.
That could be something that is very, very much bittersweet.
Yes, agreed. So, I guess this kind of leads to my next question. What do you think of the Three-Eyed Crow and the Children of the Forest, Bloodraven? What do you think about all these? What do you think their intent is, overall?
I mean, they were fucked over.
Yes, they were heavily.
That's something. So they the show version. What was the show version that they um created the White Walkers
Yes, that was their thing.
by mistake? That was a
Yes,
thing. Is that gonna happen in the books? I'm not sure.
exactly. We just don't have a lot of
Um,
information on them. It is the thing.
so it's up to it's that really is a big question, because is Bran a good guy? Is he working? What are the children of the forest up to? What is Bloodraven's real motivation? Is it even Bloodraven, the Three-Eyed?
Yeah,
Is it the same thing, or is it an entity? Is he just a body that is used by
yeah, and I
the
think
Emperor?
another interesting thing is like looking at the motivations. Like Bran is this character that goes all the way to this cave north of the wall. And
Hmm.
it's kind of like this idea that like Bran thought, maybe he'd be able to walk again and all these things, and it's not really at all what is happening or being promised. And Bran like even kind of feels like disappointed by this, like when he first gets to the cave, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
It kind of was a little misleading the way that they get Bran to come here. And that's one of my things where I question what they're actually up to. Like, are they doing this for the good of the realm, which is something we do not see like ever?
Hmm.
So, it could be some motivations that we just don't fully understand yet in the books that hopefully we'll get more of.
Maybe maybe he is being used by the children, and then he's not leaving the cave because of an attack by the others. I don't see a stupid Mark thing
I
going
don't
on in the
either.
books.
No.
It's just too easy. So maybe he is fleeing from the children of the forest, and that's when after Bloodraven died, that's when when he's fleeing, and then that hold the door thing
Yep.
happens. Um, I could see that as well. It's he learns these powers. He has to control these powers. But previously he would have been used for the wrong intent, and now he's fighting the good fight. He's fleeing and potentially
I
leaving.
mean, that's another thing with Bran as a character. It's very interesting that the way, because Bran himself like has done some interesting like things with warging that are not exactly good. Like warging into another person in Hodor is
Mm,
a little suspicious. There's also like the idea of cannibalism while he's with his direwolf. There's a lot of things that are big no-nos that you probably shouldn't be doing that Bran is doing. Is that maybe some foreshadowing that we'll see Bran maybe not be such a good guy by the end of the story? I don't know,
mm,
but it is something that George does give us to possibly look at. So my last question, and this is kind of what we've really
mm.
been talking about by the end of the story, is by the end of the story, do you think Bran will even be Bran anymore? Like, do you think he will still be Bran?
I don't think he's going to become Brand 9000, the way he was in the show, where it was like this robotic thing. But um, this obviously would change him. Um,
Yes,
it's not gonna be his childhood ended right when he was walking into that cave, or when he was dragged into that cave.
agreed.
That ended right then and there. So yeah, this will definitely change him.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll be a much different person. And even like what we've been talking about, like his views on the world could change off after learning things. Like maybe he figures out
Yeah.
why the children of the forest have kind of come to this state. Maybe some things they did in the past. Maybe there's some things that, his ancestors, the Starks, did way back in the past. His whole outlook on the world could change based off of learning information. That's what I think is very interesting and compelling about a character like Bran, and he will be kind of our vessel into maybe that knowledge. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, that's all I got. Do you have anything else you would like to talk about with Bran?
Not yet. Not yet. We will see. It's definitely not one of the fan favorites, but the
Definitely
potential
not.
is there. Potential is
Um,
there. It's just about yeah, you don't want it to be too revealing as well. So you brought something very interesting up the last time we talked, which was, what if Bran is not even a POV chapter
oh
anymore?
yeah, that's a great
What if he
point.
loses his POV at some
See,
point?
I think that is very likely with just the amount of POV characters we already have right now.
Hmm.
I think it's likely we could lose Bran, especially as he's taking on more information. I think it makes a lot of sense that he possibly would not be a POV anymore, and especially when we look at how other characters react to Bran without bringing Bran's head. So we, like, alongside of, like, somebody like, say, Jon, if he still has POVs, which I'm sure he probably will, looking at how Bran has changed and questioning Bran, like, exactly what we talked about on this point, like, could Jon and Bran be going up against each other at some point by the end of the story? How are our characters viewing him now and what he's doing? And we don't know exactly what Bran's up to. That would be an interesting take of how to do Bran's character. Now, I don't think that would necessarily happen until, like, Dream. I think Winds of Winter, he will definitely still have POVs and stuff like that. But that would be kind of a late game thing. But yeah, so again, thank you for coming on the channel, House of Stag. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, dude.
Of course. Again, subscribe to his channel. And
subscribe to his channel.
Yeah. And yeah, so we'll be back probably with another collab in the future, especially when we get some more news of stuff kind of happening. I feel like we're in a period right now where there's not a ton happening. We're getting some rumors here and there, but nothing like confirmed really. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. See you in the next one.